This is our topic 2.1, which focuses on the research problem. To begin with, what is the research problem? We find that many early career researchers think that research begins with a topic. This is not correct. Actually, research begins with what you'd like to know. You pause and ask yourself, what is it that you'd like to know? What is it that bothers you? What is it that makes you spend sleepless nights thinking about that you want to know? So, what you want to know actually becomes your problem. And that is the beginning or the basis of starting to think about research and the problem that you'd like to research. So, when you think about the problem that you want to know, it creates a basis for what you'd like to research, and that is specifically what you need to pursue. And that is the beginning of thinking about a research problem. So, what is a research problem? A research problem is simply any concern that needs to be investigated, as in anything that you think needs to be investigated. By investigation, it means something that you like to find out more about, something that you'd like to know, and that is a research problem. So, usually we tend to think of a problem only in the negative way. So, in this slide, I'll be able to present to you different connotations of a research problem. So, a research problem usually is held in the negative sense or the negative connotation, but also it can equally be a research problem that is held or considered with a positive connotation. For example, you may be interested in understanding why students in a particular school year after year fail national examinations. Failure in a national examinations holds a negative connotation, is a negative thing. But also, on the other hand, you may be interested in finding out why students in a particular school year after year perform very well in national examinations. Performing very well in national examinations holds a positive connotation, is a positive thing. But both situations are actually problems in the context of research, because you need to find out why. In one instance, the performance is very good, and also in another instance, the performance is not good. So that's why it is important that at the bottom line, you should know that anything you want to know, whether good or bad, is a problem. So don't take a research problem as the way it is taken by the public when they are defining a problem, whereby when someone thinks that a problem is something that is negative. In the context of research, whether you want to know about something that is good or you want to know about something that is bad, it remains a problem. So let us now look at the criteria of good research problems. As a student, you'll find that in most cases you will be expected to rate your research problems, but of course, before you rate them, you need to first identify those research problems. So there is a criteria that is considered when evaluating research problems. Number one, a good research problem is expressed in relationship terms between two or more variables. You find that usually, unless you are really studying a totally exploratory type of research, you find that in most cases you are looking at a cause-effect relationship. And for academic purposes, we usually encourage students to look at research problems which are relational, where you find there is one variable influencing or impacting another variable, and you will be able to establish the relationship. Of course, we shall look more at the variables when it comes to theoretical or conceptual framework and how they relate. But at the level of the research problem, it is important for you to think about the relationship between the variables that you are studying. They should be very clear in your research problem to make it good. Number two, it is important to state the research problem clearly and unambiguously. I'll just give you a scenario. Assuming you have a headache, when you go to the doctor, you specifically point out where you are feeling pain or where the headache, where you have, for example, the uncomfort associated with the headache. Or if you have, for example, an injury on the leg and you go to the doctor, you simply point out where the problem is. It is rare for you to have a particular discomfort, but when you go to the doctor, you don't specify clearly where the problem is. If you have an injury on the leg, you point out specifically at the leg, but you don't tell the doctor, for example, where you are walking, when you are playing football. No, you don't actually start telling a lot of stories. You specifically point out where you have a problem. If it is a headache still, you simply tell the doctor, I have a headache. As straightforward as that. But I find that sometimes students, when they ask to present their research problems, they do so unclearly and ambiguously. You read through, for example, the research problem and you cannot find what the problem is. You find the student is simply beating around the bush without pointing out specifically what the problem is. And you find that in that way, the student is not very clear about what he or she wants to know. So when you do that, it confuses the reader, it confuses other scholars, it confuses your supervisor, even it confuses your peers. They don't understand really what you want to research. So it is very important for you to pin down the exact problem that you want to research clearly and unambiguously. Also, a good research problem should imply a possibility of empirical testing. By empirical testing, remember we looked at the introduction to research, where we looked at the scientific method of inquiry and what empiricism means. But if I'm to remind you, the scientific method of inquiry requires that when you come up with any observation, it should be empirical, meaning that it should be able to relate to the senses. It should be able to be uh, uh, tested. So when you propose a research problem and you have something that you need to investigate, it is important for you to point out that that particular thing that you like to know can be tested. Meaning that once you have conducted research and you know what you know, or you know what you want to know, and you should be able to point out at the end of the day that you have known, or you find out or point out that you have not known, meaning that for you to be able to determine whether you have actually known what you want to know or you have investigated something that you wanted to investigate and found the results, then it should be able to be possible to test that you have actually done the investigation or not. Meaning that as you propose your research problem, you should also think of a way how you are going to test the process but also to test that you have found what you wanted to find out. So that's why this particular point number 3 means that you should be able to have a good research problem that implies a possibility of empirical testing. I'll just give an example on this point. Sometimes we find ourselves triggered by some dreams, for example. You find that you have dreamt about something in the dream. It is not in reality, but in the dream. But then you follow it up and you want to test it empirically. And then you find that there is no possibility of testing it because it is not possible to test it because it is not real. So, as we shall see later in the sources of research problems, even if you dream about something, you need to be able to translate it into means or ways that it can be tested in reality. Remember, I mentioned in our topic 1 about the importance of declaring to the scholarly community about the process you have gone through, the steps you have taken to do a certain research so that they can be able to replicate it. So meaning that if you are not able to test your research process and even the findings, there is no way you're going to be able to convince others to follow the same procedure you have followed for them to conduct a similar research. So at the level of the research problem, it is important for you to be able to propose something to investigate that has a possibility of empirical testing. Then, point number 4 is very, very, very important. Usually, students and even some other mid-career researchers propose research problems, but those problems cannot convince others that indeed they are actually problems because they have not provided a strong basis or evidence for their claim. Just as an example, picking from the previous example I gave about the performance of students, if you're investigating the reason why a certain school over the years the students have been failing, do you have evidence that actually the students have been failing? Alternatively, if you want to investigate why in a particular school students over the years have been passing, do you have evidence that actually they have been passing? So that's what it means by presenting evidence for the claim that you are making. Because without a strong evidence, it means that your research problem has no basis. You cannot investigate something which has no basis. You cannot base a research on a baseless claim. So, in any area that you'd like to research, to investigate, for example, in the context of natural resources, you find that if you're interested in investigating the reasons why a certain species of plants is threatened, do you have evidence that there is threat, evidence of threat? If, for example, you're interested in understanding the underlying causes of some health issues associated with certain food types that are sold on the market, do you have evidence? So usually when you don't have strong evidence for your claim, in most cases you decide to take what we call an exploratory stance in your research, so that you simply indicate that you're exploring what could be happening. For example, if you have evidence that a certain type of food sold in the market has effects on people's health, then you can be able to do a research to find what effect it is in detail and how it affects people's health. But if you don't have evidence, then you can be able to undertake what we call an exploratory study, where you simply explore the possibilities that you can be able to find. Of course, it doesn't mean that you are simply conducting research blindly, but it means that you'll have declared to the readers that you don't have strong evidence, but you are actually conducting a study to look for that evidence. But still, your proposal, your claim should be logical. That logically, you think there is a relationship between this and this, but you need to find the evidence for that relationship. So, when you consider these points, they will be able to help you to propose a very good research problem. So this is one of the main ways through which we can be able to tell that you have a good research problem or you don't have a research problem at all, or you have a very poor research problem. Now, let me go a little bit deeper when it comes to evidence. So what counts as evidence when it comes to the research problem? Sometimes you find that you make claims and we require you to provide evidence, but the evidence you provide is actually no evidence. So a problem is only acceptable when supported with evidence. And evidence comes from a number of sources. For example, you should be able to provide evidence referring to facts. Do you have any facts to claim that you provide that evidence? Or do you have any reference in terms of reports, published studies, books, where you can refer us, you can refer the reader, you can refer any person that you'd like to convince that you need to research this problem? So if you have, then you need to refer to them by providing details of these reports. And of course, uh, providing details of these reports, we shall be able to look at how you provide these details in another topic to do with the literature review, citation, and providing references. So apart from facts and published reports, you can also refer to authorities. Do you have an authority that you can refer to bear evidence to your claim? And remember, we talked about an authority as someone who probably is a researcher, is a scholar, and is known in their area of specialty, or someone who may not be a researcher, but is someone who holds opinions and is someone who has worked probably in a certain area and he actually can stand to provide an opinion that people can respect. For example, if you are trying to deal with the understanding of issues of domestic violence, for example, and you don't have evidence about the extent of domestic violence, but you have, for example, a trusted counselor. Usually, counselors interact with people for counseling on a number of things, and domestic violence could be one of them. Then you might be able to claim that, according to a certain authority in counseling, for the last maybe 1 year or 6 months, on average, the people that have been going for counseling have domestic violence issues. Then that person can be able to stand as an authority, and then you can be able to base yourself on that to be able to move forward. But otherwise, when it comes to the strength of the evidence, we need much more of the research evidence, much more of the reports we can refer to, much more of the publications that are peer reviewed that you can refer to, or of course empirical evidence where something is visible. For example, if you provide evidence where you want to understand deforestation, then you can, even if it is not published in the reports, but you have an area where you can take any person interested to show the extent of deforestation, then that is evidence. You have the facts, which are empirical, they are observable by anybody that may be interested. So it is very, very important to think about evidence and provide convincing evidence for you to be able to present a very good research problem. Now, let me turn to the aspect of identifying the concern. When you have a problem, it doesn't mean that that problem must be researched. It doesn't mean that that problem is a concern to everybody. Yes, it may be a concern to you as an individual, but it is not of interest to the others. So here, I present to you different ways how you should be able to show concern and then be able to bring all others to follow you, all others to be able to say that actually you have something that is worth researching. So in this way, you should be able to point out, for example, what is the scholarly community missing, or what is affecting the scholarly community by not investigating the problem. So this should be able to be declared somewhere in your research problem statement. So meaning that here you should be able to focus on the aspect of what could be missing, or what will the scholarly community miss when uh, your problem is not investigated, and especially at that particular time, because something may wait and nothing maybe happens. Even if it's not investigated, there's nothing that we are missing. So it is important in your research to bring out that aspect of what the scholarly community is missing, or what is affecting the scholarly community by not investigating the problem. Then secondly, also it is important to point out what the scholarly community is risking by not researching the problem. What is at risk? For example, as I pointed out earlier, if you have an injury on your leg, you risk, of course, many things. You cannot be able to walk, you cannot be able to go to work, you are risking your health entirely. So by not researching something that you have pointed out, what is at risk? Okay. So for example, if you are focusing on the use of agrochemicals in agricultural setups, in agricultural lands, if we don't investigate the effects of agrochemicals, what are we risking? So risk is very important to point out when you're identifying the area of concern. Then also, it is important for you to point out what are the social, cultural, economic, and political implications of not studying the problem. So the implications of not studying the problem means that there is something that will be amiss, there is something that will go wrong, there is probably something that we are actually uh, probably not addressing, and therefore it is causing social, cultural, economic, and political discomfort when we don't study a particular issue that you have pointed out as a problem. So, meaning that by identifying the concern in your research, you'll be able to convince the scholarly community, but also the public, but also the community in general, but also the government, that there is something that we are missing, there is something that we are risking, and therefore there are serious implications. Usually, of course, if we can be able to put these implications in the negative connotation, then you'll be able to convince others that you have something to research, and you'll be able to create uh, a fellowship of people that are actually also able to support you in your endeavors of investigating your research. Now, there is an important aspect that I'm introducing here, where you have your problem connected to the purpose of your research. This is very important because sometimes we find that the problem is hanging alone and we don't see the purpose. So even when you have pointed out what the scholarly community is missing, what it is risking, and the implications, it is very important to understand and also to remember that when you show how, who, what will be affected, usually negatively, by not researching your problem, it will actually be leading you to presenting the purpose of your research. And the purpose of your research is very important to support your problem. And the research problem and the purpose are closely linked. And that is why in some of the scholars' publications, they present the problem and the purpose together in form of a problem purpose statement. So this is very important, that when you're looking at the purpose of your research, link it to your problem. And the best way of linking it to the problem is for you to be able to show how, who, or what will be affected, usually negatively, by not researching your problem. So this now brings us to activity 2.1. This activity requires you to think, list, and describe two things from your area of specialty that you'd like to know or know more about. Just list. For example, if you are specializing in agribusiness, what are the two things that you'd like to know from that area that you don't know? If your specialty is natural resources management, what is it that you'd like to know? Two things. Just list and describe them. Okay? Those things you may need, or you may like to know, or you need or like to know more about. So if your specialty is agroecology, still, what are those two things that you'd like to know more about, or just to know? So this activity, you need to take about 10 to 15 minutes. Think through in relation to what we have covered here in terms of what you want to know, and start to think about it. Is it a problem that is worth the attention of the scholarly community, or it is something that it is just for you personally? So when you do this activity will lead us to the second topic, which is topic 2.2, that will be focusing on making what you have thought about that you'd like to know more about, whether it is of interest to the scholarly community. And it is important to take time, think through that, so that when we look at topic 2.2, then you can be able to improve what you have thought about in the context of interest to the scholarly community. So this is the end of topic 2.1. See you in topic 2.2.